So is there anything more we could do about it, or that's it?
Aside from calling, do you have any, what else would you like me to try?
And
to
you
do?
already sent him the emails, right?
I sent him an email on Friday
Okay,
and then
okay,
called him just now.
okay. Well, it's 7 o'clock, and I'm gonna call the meeting of Middleton Plan Commission for Tuesday, May 14th, 2019 to order. The first item is the roll call.
Commissioner Paulson?
Here.
Hubbard?
Here.
Farrar?
Yeah,
Herder?
Here.
Ramsey?
Here.
Murray? Here. 6 present and Commissioner Stavish is absent.
okay. All right, so it's not 7:05 yet, so let's go to the minutes. Approval of the minutes.
Motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor of approval of the minutes say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Okay, so we go to some of the,
Let's do number 4 and
okay.
6, right? The sign reviews,
Yeah, I
exteriors.
guess, okay, so
7.
item number 4, design review revisions for exterior modification, paint, color, and siding. SKC Properties, C. Steve Shuffler, 1918 Parmenter Street.
So Steve Schulfer is here, and he is the owner of the building. This is a very straightforward request for design review for exterior modifications. The only thing that's a little different about this one is that they would prefer not to name the tenants either for the first floor or the second floor at this time. So there is a band shown on the elevations to depict where the signage will go. I ran it by
It's in the other window. The,
Oh, yeah, I was actually looking at my comments just to read them and remind myself, sorry. There is a new light being installed with a full cutoff LED gooseneck fixture. And then also, I had to run this one by Public Works because there's a blade sign that's being proposed, and it does overhang the sidewalk, and they said as long as there's 84 inches of clearance, they were supportive. And these are the colors that are being proposed, the new gray and this ivory color.
It's right next to the pizza place.
Yes.
yeah, I was going to say the Dorian gray color is a nice picture.
There's some joke here, right?
Picture of Dorian Gray. It's a novel, Oscar Wilde.
Okay.
Sorry. If you have to explain, then yeah.
Okay, any other,
Do you need me sitting
I'll
there?
make a motion to approve contingent upon review done by the planning engineering staff.
okay, need a second?
Second.
Okay, now the questions or comments, including the Dorian Gray.
Is this a historic building?
It is next to the historic building.
It was probably built in like the early 1900s after the fire.
You have to actually speak in the mic.
Steve Schulfer, I'm the owner of the building. It's not on a register, if that's the question. It is clearly an old building, but 100 years old-ish.
Yeah, we have a historic picture of Middleton right after the fire in I think it was in 1900. And I think that either this building or the Roman Candle building, one of these two buildings withstood the fire, and you can see it in this historic image, but neither of these buildings are landmarked locally.
And it's not a historic design district that would.
No, it's not.
Okay. Any other questions? Leaf, you have something?
I'm good.
All right. Okay, then motion is to approve the design review with revisions and with some of the other caveats here. The additional review may be done by the planning and engineering staff. All those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes unanimously.
Can I just clarify? Does the motion say that we direct that staff can approve?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, the next one is a concept review for shop expansion and addition storage structure, school hand customs.
Actually,
Oh.
isn't the hearing at,
Oh, we can do the hearing now.
There's a hearing on that one?
yeah, no, it's
Okay.
7:05.
Is it 7:05?
Yes.
Okay, it is 7:05. Let's go to the hearings then. Okay, it's actually a little bit past 7:05, so I'm going to open the public hearing for comprehensive plan update, open spaces, natural sources, and environmental sustainability goals, strategies, and action items and character, history and culture, goals, strategy, and action items. You want to, well, I guess that's it. Anybody who wants to speak either in favor or against, or want to say anything? That includes you, Mark.
Any comments on the topic, as we do it
Yeah, yeah.
this spring, every 2 weeks, we have a topic, a chapter from our comp plan. In this case, just the concepts here, because we don't have the chapter drafted.
And Mark, it looks like you are expecting the chapter to be drafted by May 28th, is that correct?
I'm not
Item
so
11,
sure. Yeah,
item
I
11
don't
says staff
think-
will provide an update at the.
I don't
May
think
28th.
that will be achievable.
Okay. Anybody else want to speak? Van? You are happy, okay. I'm gonna close that part of the meeting here. Now we move to that's 7:15, so that's not 7:15 yet, so, okay. We go to item number 5. Is the owner here? I guess I see them there, okay. Concept review for the shop expansion and additional storage structure, School Hand Customs, 2404 Clark Street. Who is going to take it? Abby or Mark?
Ken? Okay. No, this was Eileen's.
Um,
Uh-oh.
So this is on the corner of northwest corner of Clark and Lee Street, just east of Paul's Neighborhood Bar. And it's Zone B3, which may surprise a lot of people because that part of Parmenter Street, which has a more residential character with some mixed commercial, actually is Zone B3, which is our Highway Business District. This is a permitted use in that district. They are requesting concept review for 2 small additions to their existing building. The staff comments indicate the setbacks that we normally would require, but there is the discretion, the ability for the Plan Commission to exercise discretion to reduce the setbacks in the course of design review, under the concept of making sure that it's suitable for the site and how it interacts with the surrounding properties. The proposed additions would not meet with the setback on the front or side streets. In fact, they come up pretty close to the, it's a couple feet, it looks like. Yeah,
I think it's 6 feet on the,
east side, and,
or, yeah, yep, 6 feet.
yeah, and then that one's about 2
And then
feet.
8 feet. Well, this says 8 feet setback, but this looks like the sidewalk.
Right, no, it's almost against the sidewalk.
It's 8 feet down there.
So Eileen
Oh, no, it says 8 feet.
suggested providing, having conceptual level discussion and providing feedback to the applicant. I know at the staff level, I think Abby weighed in on this too, but I know my view was that I'm concerned about this treating this like a downtown property with no setback, but it's not a downtown quality architecture. That doesn't mean it's not suitable on the site. I'm just saying we'd be allowing an extension, sort of having the downtown zero lot line concept, but with a use that we don't normally associate that type of use. We don't normally see that type of use with a zero setback. So that was the only observation I had, but we wanted to have the Plan Commission discuss it, provide feedback to the applicant.
Yes,
Could you,
correct.
Abby, could you pull up a aerial image?
Sure.
I'm having a difficult time seeing how close it would go to, sorry,
To, Lee Street.
Lee Street, yeah. Took me a minute. The applicant's drawing is hand drawing, so it's a little hard to see the context. Because one of the concerns you raised, Mark, is it's how it, when we approve kind of a dimensional setback, how it interacts with neighboring properties.
Right.
Right. So that's where, if we were to approve regular building plans, we like to see a little bit of the kind of regional context.
And you'll recall the Cardinal apartment building, what was it called, Cardinal Point?
Cardinal Row?
Cardinal Row, thank you. That had we required a setback to the south there, it's just off the map.
Right,
Oh,
so,
it's
here.
under construction.
okay, so there's Paul's.
Falls, yeah.
Don't know where that is, never been there before. So this would be, the expansion of Cool Hand is to the south in that area that's currently kind of fenced in.
To the east.
And to the east,
Northeast part.
Northeast.
northeast.
Northeast corner.
And how, I'm trying to remember Terrence's design on the apartment complex for Conservancy Bend. Because that's, I mean, I know your agenda item's next, but you show that, actually you have the plan there.
Yeah.
How close do you show that to Pauley's?
Right here. Well, no, it's Patrick's.
Yeah, you can bring it forward.
There we go.
Because there's two concerns. One is, I'm not as concerned with the moving close to the south to Lee Street because, well, you don't see a lot of people walking on that side, but Paul's right now has that fence that's pretty much right on the property line, right?
South side.
It's on the southwest side of Paul's. And you've got a, actually for pedestrians, it's kind of like a hidden driveway. I mean, everyone knows it's there, but on the east side of Paul's.
Yeah, there is, yes.
So the new storage area that Cool Hand is proposing on the south side is how big?
It's,
34 by 28, I think.
34 by 28. So it's really like a garage, like one garage door width.
Yeah,
About-
the storage area is 28 by 30. It'll have we're thinking probably a 16-foot door in the front.
Okay.
And that'll mainly just be for storage. It won't be heated or any of those things. Pretty much right where
So
the
the
fence
access is
line
right off the
now.
parking lot where it is now.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. But then I guess the question is, you're proposing on the northeast side, straight line with the existing building. So it will be still south of the parking lot for Paul's.
Correct, yeah.
I
I-
follow that.
not the Paul's. Paul's, it will be close to the, it will be right across from the Clark Street
So
parking lot.
North is to the east, to the right here.
Yeah. So it's on the east side. If you go back to the aerial,
So it will be right there.
it'll be right there.
Yeah.
Right, so that the footprint of that building will not be any closer to Conservancy Bend apartment than Paul's driveway. I mean,
Parking lot.
parking lot.
Yep, it'll
And-
line
and
up
they're
with the
obviously gonna
other
screen that.
building there.
And there won't be driveway access to Conservancy Bend. It'll have to be off Clark Street. Okay. No, that's okay.
What is the distance from the front of the current building to the street? So off to Clark Street. Yep, from,
To the street or to
Correct.
the lot line?
to the lot line.
Yeah, and we've also noted in the staff comments, we'd like to see a sidewalk ultimately installed along it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're actually working with our Public Works Department to get a sidewalk installed on the east side of Clark Street on this property that the city owns up against the parking lot, and we would like to also see it on the west side of Clark Street. Conservancy Bend will be putting in a sidewalk, so this would be a needed connection.
Okay.
Back to your first question, though. Yeah, it looks like about 35 feet.
5 feet, and if the proposed addition is added in the north corner, is there enough room for a sidewalk?
I think Public Works said that they thought we could fit a sidewalk within the existing right-of-way that we had, although they were concerned that we might not have a very wide terrace that would be suitable for planting trees. So it looks like from the edge, the right-of-way edge to, let's see, the edge of the right-of-way, sorry if I can get my thing to cooperate here.
It doesn't look like there'll be a planting terrace there at all. It'll just be a sidewalk curb.
Yeah, it might be like what we are gonna have on Parmenter and University, where it's the hardscape terrace poured right up against the,
Yeah, that's barely 6 feet.
But whatever it is, it has to be consistent with the conservancy condos, isn't it? I mean, it should be something similar, right?
When I look at the situation relative to the drawing that's in front of us there, you can see that the extension southward, I think, is no problem because you're just extending the building towards Lee Street. If you bump that building out towards the east, it presents a whole different approach to the new development.
So that's 7.27 feet, 2 inches.
I mean, the existing building's about even with the proposed.
Right, you could bump it out a little bit without obstructing the kind of view, but I think it really compromises what you're seeing as you drive down the street if you bump it out all the way.
What's the, can you show the east elevation?
yes.
That's gonna be from the,
So the
Yeah,
east meaning the front.
Front, yeah,
yeah.
there you go.
Here we go,
Bottom one.
right here. And there's the garage door that he was talking about.
Although by zoning rules, I think the south is actually the front.
So the expansion
Yeah, cause it's
gonna
the
be
new.
taller than the existing?
What's that?
Is the expansion gonna be taller?
No.
So it's the same height?
Yep, yeah, the storage side will be the same height on the south side, and we're actually gonna carry it, so it continues, looks like one solid building from the front face. And then,
You're calling the front face the part on Clark Street?
right, yeah,
Not
Clark
Lee
Street, what we consider the front of the building on Clark Street. And then, actually, I think the other building is about 3 foot shorter, that we were proposing to have come out on that east side.
Are you guys familiar with what the building looks like now, or would it be helpful for me to pull up street view?
Yeah, can you pull up street view?
Yeah, this is something which used to be owned by the city and sold it maybe about 10 years ago.
Which used to be owned by the city?
This building.
This building? Clark Street, yeah.
Okay.
There's the back of Paulie's. Which again,
Come on.
yeah,
Nobody's ever been.
I mean, when you're
Oh.
driving along Parmenter, because of the changed highway, you're seeing the back of Paul's.
I just remembered too that Eileen told me that,
Driven down that street.
that Clark Street hasn't been updated since '07. I'm not really sure why it's not letting me drive down Lee Street at all right now, though. That's really odd. Come on. This is why I should always bring a mouse, but I never do. I always just use my keypad.
Exactly how I drive.
Whoa,
Don't like mice.
yeah, you're right. I'm not sure if it'll
Sorry about
help
this.
me. For some reason, it's, Oh, you know what? I wonder if it was when we had that one-way situation going on here,
Yeah.
and would that be why it wouldn't let me? I'm not sure. Let me try another way here.
So I'm looking at the Conservancy Bend residence on the east face. It looks like from the lot line, the proposed lot line,
There you go.
there's 20 feet setback before the building facade, though the actual envelope is further in, and it is just about in line with the current Cool Hand Customs east facade.
Well, that's what it was a few years back.
Yeah. It's been painted and upgraded a little bit since then. That's a 2007 image. Is there a driveway on the north side of your property?
think so.
Between you and the Paul building?
No.
You mean through
Where
here?
that truck
Yeah.
is? Where that truck is now is like a dumpster
The curb
enclosure.
cut.
Oh, here. Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah, that
Yep.
curb cut, that's not on the new Conservancy Bend.
Right.
That's where the access to underground parking would be, wouldn't it? Somewhere in there?
No, he'd have to have a new curb cut, I think.
That is about the location of
Access.
the new access for the
Oh, it is,
underground
okay.
parking
For the
for
underground
multifamily.
That's it. Thank you.
So they're gonna have 3 curb cuts on Clark Street.
So I'm a little less concerned then about the jutting out on the east side, because the main interaction with the apartment building is gonna be to go into the underground parking.
Correct. So I think one of the other issues is the sidewalk connection, so those components coming through where the light post is, everything is proposed to be on street with no terrace.
It'll go right through the light pole and the,
Fire hydrant.
and the fire hydrant? Yeah. Those would all have to be moved. At whose
Yep.
expense?
I don't
Are they
know
in the city
about,
terrace? They're in the city right of way.
yeah, they're in the city right away. I don't know about how the city would handle the light pole relocation and I'm guessing the hydrant would be at our cost, although I'm not sure. What I do know is we would typically assess the cost of the sidewalk construction to the adjacent property owner.
Yes.
So that pole is MGNE then, or not? The electric pole?
I'm assuming that it's MG&E.
As part of the Parmenter Street project that I managed a few years ago, we buried the power lines along Parmenter and onto this property, approaching from the west using TIF. But obviously, we'd have to have a discussion about any such expense. So,
Was there going to be a sidewalk connection to the Conservancy all the way down the west side of?
that's what we're recommending.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't see it showing there either, but
Yep.
There is some in here.
that's why I guess I asked. I thought we had talked about that.
Yeah.
Yep.
With this proposed expansion, and I'm looking, and again, this picture's old, but with this proposed expansion, are there gonna be more cars in the lot? And are we gonna have screening for, some way to make that look better?
Yeah, actually, the vehicles that are outside, and I think they're in that, most of those are gone now, but yeah, those are oncoming projects, which we would wanna keep in the storage out of the weather on the south side of the building. And then, the east side expansion where the cars are parked there now would be extra workspace, and so there wouldn't be anything other than customer vehicles.
So just customer parking
Yeah, in the
then?
parking lot.
And it looks like,
Wait, say that again. Those current vehicles that we see on the aerial,
Yeah,
those would be housed inside then?
correct.
Is it
Actually,
currently
those are all been
Gonna be
redone and are gone now, so they kind of circulate, but that's the plan, is to keep those vehicles indoors and,
I mean, would you be amenable to, if we were to grant this, on the condition that customer cars not be stored outside in the parking lot? Or do, you have how many regular parking stalls?
6 right now.
6. And is that
And that-
primarily for customers coming in and out, or is that where do they leave them when they're being worked on?
That's generally for in and out. We usually only have 1, possibly 2 vehicles that we're working on at a time.
Because if I lived in the apartments that might be next door to you,
Right.
I wouldn't want outdoor storage of vehicles that are in the process of being worked on.
Right.
Customer cars coming in during business hours is one thing, but outdoor storage,
Well, and your business is a little different in that you're restoring, right? It's.
Correct.
I understand, you're
Yeah.
not just, people aren't just coming in to get their brakes fixed,
Yeah, some of our
Restoration,
projects
customer.
run for 3
They run for-
months, maybe a year long, so.
you're pimping things
Oh,
out.
wow.
It's pretty cool.
So they run for quite some time. We don't have a whole ton of people in and out, other than, we do a few small projects, helmets and gas tanks and stuff like that. But, yeah, most of the projects are pretty extensive, so.
So do you also plan to fix the parking lot? I mean, it
Yes,
looks,
that's definite.
sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Yep, that is, actually was the start of this, and we were actually going to do the parking lot, but we're trying to wait until, we got all of the expansion stuff done and knew what we were doing with the rest. But, yeah, I would definitely love to have a new parking lot in there, so.
Can I ask you a question? So in the plan that you submitted on the north, there's looks like a long fence with a dumpster inside. And then there looks to be a gate. Do you know the material and height of the fence?
Be a 6-foot, probably pine fence, similar to what we have now. We'd like to get something a little more durable, actually, than what's up there now, because it's taken quite a bit of damage over the years, so we need to get something that's gonna hold up a little better.
So that area is only used for dumpsters.
Dumpster and, yeah, pretty much.
And just note, the commission, there's, in terms of the Conservancy bend, there is one apartment outdoor sort of space that would be right against that fence. But you said 6 feet tall?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's,
That's what our ordinance
that's
requires, right?
debatable.
To
so.
screen a dumpster?
I'm not sure if our ordinance specifies the height required.
No, just.
It just has to be screened.
Screened.
Yeah.
And as far as that lot line, if I remember from your notes,
It's a lot to cram in there.
there's setback on the north that would normally occur. So where this fence is proposed, it's sort of right on the lot line.
And that fence already exists right
Yes.
now.
Okay.
And how much is the setback there, Abby, do you know?
Is that in the comments,
On the
Mark? I'm
north
not
side.
sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
Front is 24, side is 8 feet.
It doesn't meet the rear setback, which is the north setback in this case.
That's the rear. Oh, okay, 30 feet, whereas this one looked to be about 12.
We could measure, I would be surprised if it's 12.
According to the drawings.
It's pretty close. I think that fence in area there
Is
is
this
about
the
10.
fence right here?
It's
Yep,
like it, yeah.
yep. That's the enclosure right now.
And it doesn't right now extend further north like what's being proposed?
Now
on
it's
the-
about 8 feet back from the edge of the building.
Keep in mind, just, since we're starting to use these air photos more often, there's usually just distortion with aerial photography.
Yes,
I shouldn't say usually, but there can be.
there always is, I would say.
Well,
This is never
I know
100% accurate.
I wouldn't say there always is, but much of the time there is.
These are ortho-rectified, so you don't see topography, but
No, but you'll see in different parts of the city, especially the Baskerville neighborhood, where there's significant, several feet distortion as it relates to.
Right, oh yeah, the property lines drawn on are not always.
Right. But this should be pretty good because the street was centered in the right-of-way, so I always go by that when I
Oh,
look at,
yeah.
you know, I look at that, and so that's why in this case, I think east to west, the distortion seems to be, there doesn't seem to be that significant. But in this case, you know, you can't go by where that fence line is in relation to the property line necessarily. I mean, there might be some distortion.
Right. The fence is probably between 1.5 feet and 3 feet off the north property line.
The addition would extend the line of the existing building, as I understand.
Yes.
So, it looks like the trend line is to get further setback than the existing building.
So that doesn't matter, sir.
It's, well, I mean, any new addition needs to comply with our setbacks, but in this case, our minimum setbacks, but in this case, there's the discretion to reduce those setbacks, so in that sense, it doesn't matter, but, just because there's an existing building there doesn't give somebody the automatic right to continue that building line.
And an expansion of a building, if the building is non-conforming, would require a variance
Right.
as well.
Right, but because we have this language, as Eileen included in the staff comments, there is that discretion for a B3 zoning district to reduce the minimum setback as it applies to the site.
So the only minimum setback we have to reduce is the one on the north side of the property.
No, I think
No,
the
the rear
east
setback.
and the south.
The east side, right, and
The
okay.
only one that's not affected, well, actually, no, the west side is affected because that addition on the south side is the full width of the building, right? So
Correct.
all 4 setbacks would be reduced. And the other issue I was gonna point out is that you're taking away some of the parking area. And I'm not sure, I think the drawing showed 5 or 6 parking spaces in the future.
Correct, and those aren't, and that area there is all open because of the bay doors,
Right.
so that's not part of our parking stall
So you may
area.
not need it for your business, but a future use of this site in a B3 might not meet the parking, it wouldn't probably meet the parking requirements.
Are you changing the exterior of the whole building?
Yeah, we were gonna redo it to match, at least the exterior face of, the existing, to match what the additions will be.
Okay, so how do you feel?
This is just at the concept level again.
So this is the concept
concept
level,
level.
and then work with the staff and bring it back?
Well, it sounds like our main concerns are sidewalk access on the east side of the property. And would like staff to explore what the relocation of the utilities would look like.
Okay,
Because if someone's expanding a building that causes us to relocate utilities, there'd have to be some cost recovery or assessment on that. Unless utilities are already
Yeah,
in the
it looked-
city
Our
right away.
expansion shouldn't,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Shouldn't touch
yeah,
it.
No,
no.
based on
It's
looking
on
at
the
that drawing, I don't think that they're gonna come anywhere near that,
Nope.
out with the 10-foot pole.
Is there any way you can reduce the addition on the east side?
What type of space do you guys need from the curb to do the sidewalk there?
Seems like that's the real design question, right?
I mean, obviously, I'd like to go as far as possible, and if we go too small, there's no point.
There's
in
no point, because you
doing
can't
it.
fit a car in there.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know on the south side, where that fenced-in area is right now, I think there's 8 feet from the curb, from where that fence is now out to the curb, which is where we're proposing the one addition. So you can kind of get an idea if, if there was, 6 to 8 feet in there, what there would be, what it would look like on that side of the
and
building.
the sidewalk is already there on that side, right?
Right. I'm less worried about the building coming up there.
You're trying to get an idea of the
Yes.
dimensions, slide that around to the east side, how much space we need.
Yeah, I'm just saying visually it would, you know, if we did left 8 feet there, that's about what we'd be looking at.
But the building would be right on top of the sidewalk
The
then.
building would be right on top of the
Right on
sidewalk.
top of the sidewalk.
And that kind of,
There's no
the
way to-
design idea of the sidewalk is we're adding all these houses and we're connecting through to what's gonna be a much higher flow street once the new high school's expanded. So the idea of kind of a linear sidewalk that connects right to the green space.
Right.
Yeah,
A
that's pretty
building,
important.
a kind of square building is gonna really break that up.
The other thing, I just want to flag for the commission, I don't know if it was in the comments, but the access control policy for the city and whether it's something that we would want to consider as part of the approval, because right now, this site has curb cuts that kind of expand a
Yep.
good part of the east lot line. And typically for a site of this size, it would be limited to one curb cut.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would affect bringing the
I
cars
would
in.
actually be fine with it. That little 3-foot section in the middle there is a nightmare when we're plowing the lot anyway, so.
So we
I
got,
mean, to be fair, it's a good business and an opportunity to expand in there, kind of clean up the building a little bit is a good thing. It's,
And the customer base that we have, we definitely need to have, you know, a nice looking building. It needs to be done.
and also since the new building is coming up close by, you want it to be look a little bit better too, so. I mean, that's not required, but it would be good, so. Okay, so what is?
if we could see,
Plans again?
I'd hate to, well, do we want to require him to do a whole survey and, or like a professional surveyor, so we know exactly the, setback and lot lines
I
and
think that should be part of it.
right-of-way and, proposed sidewalk? I don't know how to require that. Is that required for a building? It comes before us for like a waiver of setbacks, right?
Yeah.
Do we require a full set of site plans for that?
The onus is always on the applicant to be responsible for putting the building where they say they're gonna put it. I think it's appropriate to have a survey for most projects, something like this, where they're making substantial changes and they're getting very close to lot lines, I think kind of begs that.
Yeah.
If it's we don't require it of a homeowner who's putting a deck, we don't. So, but I think in this case, given that they want to get so close to the lot line, it would be wise on their part, even if we didn't have that as a requirement, and I don't think it's technically a requirement, but the planning commission can require as a condition of approval.
Like, have a professional surveyor come out and
Yeah.
really measure all those lines.
Right, yeah, and we had assumed once we got through design phase, if it was looking good, that we'd have architectural drawings done of everything we plan to have done and get that moving.
I think in addition to that, I think there does need to be further consideration of that east expansion. I think presently, it appears to be just too far, given that, the addition of the sidewalk, and so,
And we weren't aware of the sidewalk going through at all
yeah.
at that point, so.
I think what you're hearing is, we want to work with you.
Yep.
We respect your business and want the business to flourish, but we need a plan that works.
Okay. So, yeah, we just need to figure out exactly how far we can go that way and still have enough space for that, what you guys want to do, so.
Okay,
Right, because when you're talking about a sidewalk, I forget what our ordinance says, but general best practice is that there's some green space on either side, so it has both the ability for, if you have too many people walking, they can go around, but also a sidewalk right next to a building feels
Tight.
tight.
And you're gonna have, there's gonna be a garage right there, so you're gonna have cars coming
Big
in.
garage,
and-
you're gonna
I
have,
have a real quick question. Is there a proposal to put sidewalk on both west and east side of Clark Street?
Yep.
Okay.
But not coming onto private property.
Okay.
It'd be in the city right
Staying
away.
within the right
Yeah.
of way, yeah.
And one
Okay.
idea that we haven't even discussed at the staff level, which I'm just thinking now outside the box, but is one could theoretically narrow the street to get a wider terrace.
Because there's no curb and gutter on the street yet.
That's, what's there is pretty minimal.
I think it's
Very.
actually on the 5-year plan. I'll try to pull it up. So that would be kind of the ideal time to do that.
Right. I mean, this,
Because we would want Conservancy Bend to be developed and then fix Clark Street.
the thing is,
See.
you know, this is an area where on-street parking is desirable because
2021.
it's, aside from being near the PAC,
2021, yeah.
it's,
Yep.
you know, by Paul's, which has overflow, which, you know, that.
Paul's is pretty busy.
They, you know, Friday night fish fry. I mean, the point is, there's business, you know, there's a lot of on-street parking demand in that area, so narrowing the street would remove parking on one side. It's a trade-off. But it's not going to be a, you know, a street that has high speeds, because it's a cul-de-sac.
And then there's
But we
also
can look at that at the staff level.
large parking lot right across the street as well, over by the MASH school.
Yeah.
Right, but these
Yeah, but
things
that's going
fill up.
away.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
that's right.
These things fill up, but my point is, there's special events at the high
High
school.
school expansion?
High school's expanding, but is not
Not that
adding
parking.
parking in any significant amount. So,
Yeah.
there's gonna be more people, more activity at the high school, so I don't, you know, that parking lot's gonna be fuller more often, and then, you know, there's the park, of course, there too, which doesn't have parking on site, so. So removing parking, on-street parking is not, I'm not saying that we wouldn't wanna do that, it's just an option.
Yeah, I don't know if Clark Street is part of the permit parking system around the high school.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is it?
Sure.
It is part of it?
Yeah.
But it looks like that segment of Clark, north of Lee, as well as that small segment of Lee, is on the 5-year plan for 2021 road construction.
They might end up pushing that back, right? Because
Don't say that.
we really need to get high school finished and the Conservancy Bend finished and then
And do it.
do the road.
Yeah, otherwise you're just digging it back
Otherwise, you're
up.
digging it up again.
So, Mark and Abby, what would be the process for these folks to become aware of what the plans are for the sidewalk and road so they can work with that?
I think we have, I was trying to pull up our standard specifications that shows, for this type of street, what the width of terrace would be and the width of, sidewalk. I'm sure it's a 5-foot sidewalk, but I'm not sure about the terrace width. We can talk with our engineering department. We actually have a meeting with them tomorrow morning, so we can talk with them and then report back to you guys
Okay.
about it.
And that will basically let us know what our setback would be required to be from that sidewalk that may or may not be there in 5 years.
I think the sidewalk will definitely be there when it will need to be installed. When the Conservancy Bend apartments are
Okay.
constructed, I'm guessing that the Plan Commission would want to prioritize that getting installed. Now, on the east side, because the city actually owns the parking lot that's across the street that the school district primarily uses, but it's city-owned, the city will have to pay for the cost of installing that sidewalk segment, and our engineering department is looking at doing that next year.
I guess really the question for these folks is, how much space do we want between the
Sidewalk and the
Yeah,
building.
yep,
between,
okay.
you know, our
Yeah.
and their building?
Especially if we're allowing a waiver of the setbacks, we wanna know what we're actually doing, what we're
Right.
impinging on.
How much setback we still want?
Okay, so,
I mean, even a rendering that shows what visually that might look like.
So, I think, Mayor, what you're trying to do is focus our discussion so we can move on to the next
Yep.
item. So this is, again, concept review. It's not binding on the Plan Commission, but you're trying to give feedback to the applicant, and as you can hear, there's support for business and keeping the business here and enhancing its viability and the appearance of the building. So that's what I'm hearing for the purpose of the minutes, but somebody may want to make a motion indicating that you're not obligated to, but if you wish to provide a formal position by the Plan Commission for concept review, and then list the issues that are outstanding, or that we want to focus on, which, Kurt, you started mentioning sidewalk access on the east side and
Yeah, we'd
relocation
like
utilities.
to, and we'd like
but-
to see a
survey.
Formal survey of the
formal
property.
survey.
I don't know when the appropriate time is. Is there any stormwater issues that need to be addressed at some point?
No, in fact, we didn't even get wet and we got that 9 inches last time.
Because you're not expanding impervious cover.
Yeah, then,
Well, it is, 'cause
well,
this is
no, they are,
Oh, they
that's the
are,
green
yeah.
space there, so.
Was that, yeah,
I'm
I
just-
think we would
Yeah.
probably
At
want.
some point in time, I suspect that that'll have to be.
There's a threshold, and we will check on that. We'll talk about that in our staff.
Okay, so you know all the issues now, so,
And then design-wise, you talked about channeling the parking, or channeling the driveway, I mean. I heard that. Is that part of the concern? I don't want to put words in your mouths. Was that, or that was Abby, actually.
was
I think,
Abby,
who
yeah.
said that. How does the commission feel about
In
that?
other words, eliminating
Access to the
to
site.
one curb cut, is it? So-
yeah,
Right,
One curb
and
cut.
of a, reasonable width, and that is also included in our standard.
I'm sure when
Specs.
they rebuild the road, that would happen, no question about it, so.
Yeah, that'd be great, because that's been that way since we bought the building. We hate those two driveways, they're just a pain in the butt.
And then the last thing that we haven't, that I don't know how to record for the minutes is the, any comments you had about the design. I think I heard them say that they are they're planning to reclad the entire building with the new,
Correct.
right? So if there's any feedback on the design.
What was the cladding, like a hardy plank sort of?
Right now, we were just
metal.
going to do it in the steel, but that's definitely up for debate. That was just initial.
We just want it all to match,
So it all matched.
really. We just
I-
want
I like the
like
steel.
one
I like the
continuity,
steel,
one
I like
nice
the wood
looking
fence.
face, and steel will last, is the reason we kinda went with that.
That sounds like a good idea, so.
So steel
Is
cladding.
there-
original.
Is there a recommended setback from the sidewalk that we want to give these folks on the east side? I mean, kind of occurs to me that something like a minimum of 4 feet or something like that from the sidewalk to the edge of the building would be reasonable.
What are our ordinances
Will normally be a 20-foot setback.
The property line,
from the property
Property
line?
line. From the sidewalk, it'd be 6,
6 more
Inches.
inches, yeah.
so it's
6
essentially.
inches or
Essentially,
6?
from the sidewalk, it's 20 feet essentially.
The city usually keeps 6 inches outside the sidewalk.
I'm rounding, but yeah,
Yep.
essentially, it's normally a 20-foot setback, which is why I flagged this as a.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I'm not trying to speak against the project, I'm just saying, there isn't anywhere else in this area, Parmenter Street or certainly Clark Street, where we have that type of setback, and that doesn't mean we can't establish that, but that's what you're doing is establishing.
And I
that.
think that is what's proposed on Conservancy Bend. If I'm reading the plan right, on page 30 of the GIP submittal, they've got a 20-foot setback from the lot line, though, not from the street.
On the T3.
Right here.
It would be nice, oh, go ahead.
Yes,
What
Jennifer.
page
Move
did
this
you
up.
say it's on, Jen?
Jennifer, go ahead.
Looks like,
30?
there's a couple page numbers on here, 8, 30, or 20 of 48.
What?
I know,
Wait a
just keep
second.
going, it's in there, the GIP. It's probably
Yeah, I-
the 8th page in there.
Okay, and within the GIP.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably on page 8.
Property, that would leave 5 feet with the 30 feet that we've already.
Yep, that one. So if you look, yep, right where your arrow just, yep,
Right there.
there, if you zoom way in, it says 20-foot setback.
What's building 13, or T3, I mean?
Those are the townhouses.
Right, but what's the setback?
Ooh,
Doesn't seem like a
hard to
lot.
read.
Because what would be nice if you had a uniform setback?
Right.
Well,
20.
Correct.
or at least not an outlier.
Which if
T3,
you-
what's the building setback? For
T3 is
Conservancy?
closer, it looks
Right.
like.
And then T2
Oh,
actually is pretty.
it's on here, but it blurs whenever I zoom in.
About 8 feet?
From the property line.
From the property line.
And the,
And this one's labeled here, it looks like it says 7, but I can't really tell. T2? T2 is 6, okay.
From the property line, so does that mean that we can be?
Because I
we'll try
think
to
Well,
stay-
six
the
is what
reason
we
I
have
wanted to
proposed.
ask what that was because we're talking about will this be an outlier with the
Right.
building, or will there be others? And again, it's good to see the Conservancy, the plan for Conservancy Bend, because, we can see that the intent is to create that street edge instead of having bigger setbacks, which, again, is a
Right.
fine, we encourage that in our downtown area.
No, we will keep it consistent, so whatever is.
But consistent with what? Because we have 6 feet, 8 feet, and 20 feet.
No, consistent with the,
I think we still come back to the question, we need to know where the sidewalk is gonna go so we can decide how far up their building can go. Because what these folks are concerned about is if we tell them too far, that it's only a 30-foot building,
Yeah.
and we're talking about cars here.
Yeah.
So, at some point it becomes,
Not worth
what's
it.
the point?
And often cars from the 50s are big. They're all just big.
Well, the other thing we don't want, though, is we don't want a car to come outside that building and sit on the sidewalk.
Of course.
So, there are those concerns too.
Which is
How
also.
many
what
bays would you
we're
have
trying
in
to-
this new building? How many bays for working?
We'd like to add 2,
Two.
Yep.
is basically what we're hoping to get out of
Side
that
to side or
additional-
back to back?
Side to side.
I decided. How big is the bay that you need?
The one bay with the lift needs to
20?
be at least, about 20 feet. And then the other
And you
bay
got-
was gonna be fabrication, so we were already kinda splitting
They're
it
already
down to
pretty
like
tight.
15. The biggest thing was to get a lift in there so that we can get cars up in the air and get things moving. And then
35, so that's what the minimum you need.
The access would be from the south, though, right? From the parking lot.
correct.
Correct.
So.
Oh, they would
so
not be,
that's-
okay.
That's why I think it's used, I think this exercise of talking about the widths is good, but we need to make sure that we're thinking, the vehicles would be oriented north-south, parallel to Clark Street.
So there would not be a bay door right
Correct.
by the
On
sidewalk.
Clark Street, no.
So with that, now maybe it's helpful to hear what the answer is again. Now I'm confused.
20 feet and 15 feet, right?
Yep.
35.
So 35, and this is a
I'm
30.
thinking
30 by 30.
30 by.
Yeah, you really can't go any narrower.
Right.
You got 16 feet doors.
Okay, so I guess they have to work quite a few things
I
out.
think that leaves us like 6 feet off of that line.
Off of, the end of the
Yeah.
curb.
The end of the
The
curve.
curb is different than the
Or
lot
no,
line.
Curb is
here.
different than the lot line, yeah.
Should leave us off of the parking lot.
So
we'll
have to-
much more
parking lot.
detailed engineering drawings would be helpful, or survey.
I think they need to work with the staff.
Yeah.
And they are not really ready right now.
So how about, if I may summarize, do we just start listing the issues? There's no motion I'm hearing, unless somebody has made one, I didn't hear one. And so we'll just list the issues, I'm sorry? Yeah.
No motion.
So, and that's fine, we'll list the issues and continue our work, and, you'll have to get you've heard that they want a survey, and we want a survey.
But that's
So
fine.
we'll continue to work with you.
And that's kind of why
I
we
gu- I
wanted
guess I
to
have one other
get together with you guys to find out if it was worth us spending the
One
time
other
and money to
comment.
do that.
And since you're thinking of recladding the entire building, I would wonder if you would consider taking some of the visual cues from some of the other buildings that are in the area so that there's some consistency. It doesn't have to
Right.
be exact, but, it's some style, some design.
As long as it
so they
doesn't
all
turn
kinda
into
look
looking like
they
a
fit
residential
together.
building.
Right.
I
And
mean,
we had
that's the
kinda
biggest thing.
Toyed with the idea of possibly doing like a 3 or 4 foot, maybe brick or stone at the bottom section
Yeah,
of
I-
the steel.
yeah, whatever,
windows,
is in the
something like
area
that.
to make, kind of grab the visual cues off of Polly's and maybe what's being proposed.
So, from what I hear
Visual
is,
cues off of Paul's.
we like the concept, but there are some issues which you need to work on.
I like the steel to show.
Is
So
that,
how do we get the information of exactly what we need to submit for, like, if we want to do site plan and get drawings in for an engineer of what that sidewalk setback would be?
We'll discuss all that at the staff level with
Okay.
you, not
Yeah,
at
we'll
this
help
meeting.
you out with
Okay.
that. We will talk with our Public Works and Engineering staff about it
Okay.
tomorrow morning, just since we
See where
always
we're
meet
at.
with them on Wednesdays. And we will go over the discussion
Okay.
that we're having
And then
tonight,
figure
and
out
then
what
hopefully we
need to
can
look for.
report
Okay,
back to
Awesome.
you guys.
awesome. Very good. Okay, thank you much. You guys
Sorry
are
it took
great.
so long.
Yeah, sorry for taking up all
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it's beyond 7:15, and I'm going to open the public hearing for rezoning Conservancy Bend Residences 2413 and 2421 Parmenter Street. Anybody who wants to speak? Go ahead.
Hello. I don't go to Paulie's either, just putting that out there, nor do I know anything about fish fries. John Hepner with T-Wall, our market development manager. So I know you're all fairly familiar with what we're proposing for Conservancy Bend, which is still a working title. We've been recommended to change that, so we're working on that. But nothing substantially different on this plan than what was seen at the Conceptual Planning Commission meeting last month. The couple of items that I just wanted to point out again that were pieces of feedback that we had already received and incorporated were previously there was a garage exit coming onto Parmenter Street here off of A1, and we've removed that to allow for just one right-hand turn off of the site, and then the entrance and exit is now proposed on Clark Street. And then we also spoke with the fire department on this drive aisle that connects Lee Street or Clark Street and Parmenter, and that is they have requested that remain, so they have full access to the site. So that was something that we had discussed potentially removing, but the fire department has requested that stay, so they have full access to the site.
Which driveway was that again?
This is just the drive aisle that runs through the middle of the site connecting Clark Street and Parmenter.
So people could not enter the site with a right turn off of Parmenter?
Sorry, yes, they could, yes.
They could?
They could enter unless the city wanted to recommend that we put in a no right turn in sign. I think
But
we'd be,
the fire department could still go in there?
yes, yes. And then the only other item was the previous proposal had 84 units in the multifamily building, and we've now increased that to 87, so a 3-unit increase, and that was just based on going through the unit mix and adjusting that a little bit. And if you'd like me to expand on our unit mix and how we've chosen that, I can expand on that a little.
I think you have that item when we discussed this. I think we can cover that there.
This is the
so.
public hearing
Yeah, it's the public hearing part
on the
of it.
rezoning.
So sorry,
No,
you
that's
would
all
like
right.
me to discuss that or not?
When we get to the agenda item, yeah.
We'll see if there's anybody else.
If you have any
who wants-
further questions for me, I'm open to
Yeah,
answer
yeah.
questions afterwards.
Anybody else wants to speak? Anybody else want to speak? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing part of it, and we're going to go to item number 2, preliminary plat review, Conservancy Bend Residences, 2413 and 2421 Parmenter Street.
The recommendation from Eileen was to recommend approval contingent on resolution of engineering staff and other staff comments following a complete review.
I have a question for the planning staff. The review, the environmental checklist component, is that typically part of this, the preliminary plat review? Maybe I shouldn't say typically part of, but would it be appropriate to consider that as part of the plat review?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Can
Yes,
we ask questions?
yes.
Now,
Yes, Kurt.
so actually with Jennifer's comments, have you guys done a phase 2 environmental site assessment of the whole property?
So we used what I believe TRC had completed a few years ago that the city had provided, and yes, we have engaged True North, our environmental consultant, and they've reviewed that, and they found a couple of additional items that pertain more specifically to what we're proposing. So they're expanding and updating that phase 2. There hasn't
The
been
reason I
any-
ask is the part of the conservancy just north of where your development will be, right? Where does your property line end on that
on the north side?
On the north side.
Dash line.
My understanding is when the students were doing the watershed project is that there were 2 sampling sites for a kind of preliminary phase 2 in that corridor that found some, well, part of that site had been a dump.
Yeah, we're aware that there is some existing contamination on the site, and we are likely going to apply for a brownfields grant, like we've done in the past. And the benefit of the townhomes being on the northern portion of the site where most of the contamination exists is we aren't excavating underground because there is no underground parking there, so the excavation will be minimal, just mainly to bring the site into grade.
Would you have to cap it?
I'm not sure right now, but if so, we would follow proper procedures that our environmental consultant would recommend.
And I guess, is that something that we have review over, or is that a state law about making sure that if there's, because I mean, my preference would be a full phase 2 assessment of the whole property, and if you're gonna put residential on something, either cap it or a very strong notice on the property deeds that people who wanna garden on the property, right? If there's soil contamination, you don't want people gardening like fruits and vegetables and stuff.
So I know that the TRC did complete a full phase 2, and True North is actually expanding on their phase 2.
Okay.
And the DNR does have to sign off on
Right.
this, so they'll have the authority to tell us what we can and cannot do, or what we must do.
And the contamination that was found in the phase 2 that the city conducted was primarily PAHs. And it was slightly in exceedance of what is allowed. And our consultant, the way that he explained it to us was that every single property on the isthmus has PAHs at the level of what was found here. As part of the city's negotiation with T-Wall, we will be transferring responsibility for cleanup of the property to T-Wall as part of the purchase agreement.
And Abby, those PH which were found, they were 4 feet deep, from what I remember, right? Or is that not on the surface, I think? Is that true?
I
or-
can't remember the specific depths. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Okay.
But DNR requires site-specific remediation, so if these were gonna be single-family homes, you would have had to probably cut it all out. But because there's nothing underground,
Yeah, I mean, there are specific requirements that we will have to follow, and whether or not so since this is one single building, that'll actually act as a cap in itself, along with the rest of the parking area. So I guess rest assured that the WDNR has very strict requirements for this, and we've always worked with them and followed those requirements, because without them, we can't build anything. That comes prior to permitting through the city.
On page 7 of 48 in our plan commission documents, there is the subdivision requirements or considerations as part of the land division and subdivision preliminary checklist for environmental assessment. So when I was reading this, I was thinking that the plan commission does have some authority to direct the applicant to answer further questions if there are some, and potentially hold a public hearing relative to the environmental issues if we so decide, and recommend it to other committees. So would recommend it to the other committees for consideration.
Who would you recommend it to?
Maybe the Water Resource Management Committee. I don't know
Okay.
if Park Rec and Forestry, if they take up issues like this. There is some endangered species, it says here on the environmental preliminary checklist. They're also not really considering increases in traffic. It's sort of not available, but I know that Eileen had mentioned a traffic impact assessment will be required.
Yes, yeah, we're in the process
Yeah.
of working with our consultant to get that process going.
Should I speak to the endangered species part too? So we actually, as a part of our WDNR process, we actually just submitted today an application to request review for potential endangered species on the site by the WDNR. So that's a process that they're going to go through, and then they make recommendations to us that we then have to comply with, again, to be able to get sign off from the state.
Well, that's
Has
positive.
an endangered species been identified to date? Because I
Pull up
did
a little
notice
bit.
that was checked off.
Personally, I'm not aware of. I would have to speak with our either our civil engineer or our environmental consultant about that. But that's also part of what the WDNR is going to fill us in on once they've done their review.
I think in like 3 or 4 more pages, there is a statement that says that there have been,
Yeah.
Before or after?
Yeah, I
Down
remember
one
reading
more.
that.
It was 3B, item.
There you go.
Item Roman numeral 3B. In the form that was filled out.
Okay.
Gotta get to the-
Keep going. And
I think it's actually
I'm
the
impressed
the
with
other
Four?
direction.
Abby and I are impressed with how thorough you guys are.
yeah.
This is a big project near a very sensitive
Oh,
landscape.
here.
There you go.
Sorry.
Yep,
Went
yep.
the wrong way.
We're looking
One
pretty
more
carefully
page
at
up.
this.
Yeah, yeah.
One more page up.
Yeah, look at the checklist.
There you go. 3B there.
like there's- yes.
So that's checked as yes, that there are
Right.
endangered, unusual, or rare species. But
Right.
it's not identified whether it's plants, birds, animals.
So we don't know
There
what.
might be something there.
So who did this check mark? Somebody must know.
This is
Well,
from
it looks like it's been
1994.
completed in
Oh,
1994.
1974?
1994.
Oh, wow, wow.
I don't think that's right. If you go to the next page,
Oh, I think that's the date of the,
I think that's the date of the
Form date.
land division
yeah.
form.
Yeah.
another, sorry, 2 more pages.
So that may have changed since then, right?
no, I think that I'm
the
wondering if the
form date.
date pertains to the
Right.
date that the form was created.
That's what I thought.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
go 1 more page, the one with the DNR stamp at the top of it. So keep going
One more,
down,
one
down,
more.
down. Sorry, I'm not, and 1 more. This
there.
one, it says created on 3/13/2019.
Oh,
And that
okay.
red writing is on there. It's
Okay.
the same font as,
So I'm assuming it was our engineer, our civil engineer Veerbicker, who completed this, because they're the ones that sent me the application for the DNR's endangered species review application. So anyway, I guess my point is that we are following the proper process through the WDNR to figure out what that rare plant, animal, wildlife is on the site, and then they will provide us the recommendation. And I can provide the city the application if they'd like to review it.
I just noticed that one of the project questions listed here is, does this project involve a public property? And it is technically public property right now. Probably
Well,
should
at
be
the
checked
time-
as yes. And it would have been on 3/13.
I think we're probably looking at it as when
Like
we own the
public land.
property
Oh,
Do you,
as the
do you own the property right now, or does the city still?
city does.
city
City
owns
owns
it.
Yeah, I'm not, the intent, I think it's obvious what happened. I mean, it was privately owned, and now the timing has just changed. I'm not worried about that, but we could change that for.
One other one I was interested in, item 1F on that form is area, is there an area with groundwater table within 10 feet of the soil surface? Do you know how deep the water table is there? Struck me that very well could be within 10 feet.
Yeah.
1F. Oh.
I don't remember exactly how.
You gotta speak in the microphone for.
I think it would be.
We just received the geotechnical the other day, right? And I believe it was between, if I remember correctly, I believe it was between 9 and 16 feet. but it varied. What they came up with the amount of water varied quite a bit. I believe it was between, if I'm remembering correctly, it was between 20 minutes and 5 hours where they actually were showing some signs. So obviously that's also, depending on the soil and the hydrology, it's also going to depend on the amount of rainwater received at any given time, so. And we can get you specifics on that if you need that as well out of that geotechnical report.
Okay?
Well, so I think what Jennifer is asking is, within our ordinance, we can require a separate public hearing on all the environmental assessments on a property.
What do you?
I'd like to make a motion to delay recommendation for approval until, we have a complete review of these issues and there's a public hearing.
So, or would you be open to, if we approve the concept of the GIP, the rezoning, to do it conditional on all these reviews?
I think that will make sense, otherwise that will delay the project quite a bit.
Is that,
Is that okay with you, Jennifer?
or you want to delay consideration of the GIP until we have the full assessment?
Now you were on the plat, just as
We're
a,
on the plat.
We're on the GIP, right?
We're on
Oh,
the
we're on the
plat.
plat?
yeah,
Mm.
right,
Yeah.
technically, that's what.
We're
Yeah,
on the
that's
plat.
So
item
why,
number 2.
why are we doing a plat review if we're also doing a GIP?
They go together, obviously. I'm just pointing out that technically your agenda item is the plat, but I don't know why they're in this order.
Yeah, we should approve we should conditionally approve the GIP before we do the plat.
Okay, so you want to go to
Well-
item number 3 then?
No, I want to ask Jen, should we, I don't think a public hearing on the environmental assessment report, because it only requires a Class 1 notice, that wouldn't slow things up too much. Because a Class 1 notice for the public hearing, we could do it at the next plan commission.
Wouldn't be able to because we would require 4 weeks because we missed the newspaper.
We missed the newspaper deadline. So it only requires notice once, though.
Right. Well, but if it's Class 1 or Class 2, because we need 4 weeks, either one, it's going to be the same result.
It's gonna be 4 weeks.
At least does our ordinance say that you can't approve a subdivision plat until if you order a public hearing on an environmental assessment, you can still approve a subdivision plat, it's just,
I was going to get the ordinance before it, caveat it up.
I can pull it up.
Well, I know that.
So what
well,
I
there's a
hear-
portion
what I
of
hear-
it quoted in the packet.
What I hear is we want the environmental assessment to be completed and
do.
completely discussed, but I think we also don't want that to immediately halt,
To delay.
so that we could have some work proceed contingent on satisfaction of those requirements. Is that right, Jen?
I guess the one concern I would have with that, if it would, if you wouldn't have the ability to go back and make different choices based on the outcomes that are found. Environmental assessment.
You mean changes to the program and the buildings and the locations?
Right, if there was a concern
Right.
about locations of gardens, for example, or certain things like that, that might impact.
Well, the city did quite a bit of this work, almost 6 months, studying those for various chemicals and stuff, and we did the phase 1, phase 2, so, and we have fair amount of information, what we did find there, right, Mark or Abby?
What was that report? Was that a phase 2 environmental assessment report?
I have not
Yes,
been working on
yeah, it was a
this,
phase
so-
2.
Okay.
And
Of the whole property?
Yeah, that's,
there were, I think, 6 locations of borings. We could bore within the parking lot and we could bore in the green space. Obviously, there are buildings, so we weren't able to study what was beneath the buildings. But those are all public documents. The phase 2 assessment was actually attached as part of the request for
RFP.
proposals that the city sent out to developers. I think, to me, the issues that were raised in the phase 2 environmental analysis, are no more extensive in terms of contamination than what we've seen on a lot of the downtown projects that T-Wall has taken on and received site assessment grants for. I also don't oppose the idea of having, determining that, you know, we need an expanded environmental assessment or holding the additional public hearing. I think that would be fine as well. There has been more public information about the contamination on this property than typical, just because of the public process that the city went through to send out the RFP.
I'm gonna ask a really geeky question, I'm sorry. In our ordinance, when it says environmental assessment report and expanded environmental assessment report, because one time it refers to a preliminary, one it refers to expanded. Is that the equivalent thing under Wisconsin statutes as phase 1, phase 2? Or federal EPA? Because when I hear expanded environmental assessment, I think phase 2, like what?
Yeah.
Is that the same thing?
Well,
Or is this something different?
I mean, the way when we work with our consultants, they initially do like a preliminary screening, which,
Phase 1,
well, no, that's before phase 1.
okay.
And then they recommend a phase 1, and then the phase 1 will tell you there has been some surface level, et cetera, found. We would recommend a phase 2. So it sounds like what your ordinance says might refer to just a phase 1, whereas expanded could mean phase 1 or phase 2, but that's just kind of how our environmental consultant operates. It's kind of like a 3-phase process.
Okay.
Once you're all the way through it.
I'm trying to figure out in our ordinance, what's an expanded environmental assessment that's other than what would be a phase 2 plus whatever DNR requires for wetlands and water?
In my experience, there isn't any additional environmental consulting after a phase 2 is completed. Then you get into remediation recommendations, which is what our environmental
Okay.
consultant will do.
Wayne's a PE, so does that,
Well, unless it involved environmental issues other than hazardous contamination. I mean, expanded environmental assessment could address all sorts of issues.
right,
And
that would be identified in a phase 2.
Yeah.
yeah, and potentially like ongoing monitoring of groundwater, et cetera.
And so there's no, it's not a designated brownfield.
It is an open site on the Burt's registry because the city had to report it when we
Right.
found out about the contamination.
Right.
But I was gonna see if I could.
Another
actually-
item that I might add is in speaking with our environmental consultant recently, he informed me that the DNR is currently looking at reducing PAHs and as far as how they qualify as dirty or clean. And so that reduction may even further reduce the fear of PAHs. I'm not sure if you have heard anything on that.
Well, until they do, we'll,
Right, and
But the way I look at it is the city went through the phase 1 and phase 2, otherwise we may not have even bought it. So,
right, I'm trying to figure out under our ordinance what expanded environmental assessment means unless it's just phase 2.
I think it's just phase 2, although they did some additional work after the phase 2 on the city's behalf, and they called it a phase 2.5. So I just pulled it up. This is the phase 2 and the phase 2.5 environmental site assessment.
Yeah. I mean, phase 2 doesn't just mean second phase, it's a particular term under, yeah.
So they did 6 borings. They installed temporary groundwater monitoring wells at each location, and then they submitted the soil and groundwater samples for lab analysis. And then there should be a handy dandy chart in here that
Which-
shows the exceedances.
As long as we're talking about phase 2, we should, just go on the record, we should do a phase 2 of the entire creek corridor. But that's a different issue, because it hasn't been done post-flood.
well, we did some of it, few sites,
2 sites,
yes, 2 sites.
you do about
So
30 sites.
I guess I'm willing to amend my motion to the extent that the city is satisfied that they've explored the option of all of their environmental requirements as thoroughly as they need to for the site. And without the acknowledgement of what those endangered species are and things like that, I guess I feel like it might be in the best interest to consider that.
Figure that out first.
Figure that out first. And if the city is able to make a determination from the information you get, and it doesn't need to come back to Plan Commission for that approval, I guess that would be, as long as you have the engineering requirements met for that.
So is that, your motion is for the preliminary plat review then, with those caveats?
Yeah,
Okay.
and not to delay, not to hold a public hearing
If it seems it's something minor.
Yep.
What do you think, Kurt?
Yeah, if you feel like you've met all the requirements and I do see that there's an endangered species component here in the corridor. If that won't affect the plat review in any way, which is the agenda item we're talking about, then it would be under staff review.
Well, remember, there are two buildings there right now. I mean, it's,
Right.
Well, the plat review comes under the subdivision ordinance, so that would be just about the only time we could impose additional, under the ordinance, we can only impose additional public hearing requirements, not additional environmental tests.
Was part of the,
Our ordinance,
as part of the GIP, couldn't we just require that the
yeah,
report back to us on
Right.
findings related to the endangered species aspect, and also report back on current status and remediation plans as part of implementation of the,
I'd much rather impose conditions as part of GIP approval, because that's
right.
kind of discretionary, whereas plat review is more ministerial and, we'd have to cite chapter and verse of the ordinance that we think they were deficient on, but for a GIP review, because that's conditional, we can attach almost any reasonable condition we want.
Okay. Can I withdraw my motion?
Well, that's why I was just trying to point out which one we were on before, that I don't know why we didn't, GIP isn't listed first, but I'll have to talk to
Can
you
we-
about that so I can understand that. But
Can we move to consider both items at the same time?
That's what I was, I think
Okay,
that
so
would be-
let's.
My motion is that we consider both items at the same
Okay,
time.
okay, all right.
that.
We are going to, I'm going to make, we are going to go on to general implementation plan review, Conservancy Bend Residences, 2413 and 2421 Parliamentary Street. And we're going to consider 2 and 3 together.
And I didn't hear, was that a formal motion you made to?
No, that was, the chair can decide that we can
That's
consider
exactly-
things together.
That's what I wanted to.
Because the issue on the GIP really is kind of the program, the intensity, the use, the height of the building, the placement of the driveways and all that. So can you talk a little bit about why you changed the unit mix? So you're up to 87? And I think one of the concerns our consultant raised was for a project so close to the high school, a pretty higher proportion of efficiencies in ones rather than twos or 2+.
Yeah, and so in part, we haven't we have 6 existing properties in Middleton: the Masters, Tribeca Village, Middleton Center. At none of those properties do we have 3 bedrooms, but we have gotten some feedback from potential residents in some of these downtown locations and on the periphery that they would like to see 3 bedrooms. So we've actually incorporated 8 3-bedrooms into this property, which we feel is pretty substantial.
How many were in the RFP submission? There weren't that many.
No, I don't, we may have even increased it. I couldn't tell you exactly though. Seeing that we've increased our unit mix by 3 units tells me that we didn't adjust the 3 bedrooms very significantly. Because if we did, there would have been far more units added. So 8 3-bedrooms, I mean, that could house, 4 or even 5 people potentially in one unit, depending on the family. So for us, we think that that's a pretty significant amount of 3 bedrooms, which could certainly be families of high school students nearby. Likewise, the 2 bedrooms so we have 8 3 bedrooms and 16 2 bedrooms, I believe. So likewise, the 2 bedrooms, that could be, a family of 3 or 4, depending on how do they utilize the space. So as far as the higher density units go, we feel that we are providing a pretty reasonable mix, and we're listening to feedback that we've received from potential residents at our previous properties. And then regarding the studios and 1 bedrooms, the majority of this property's future tenants will be young professionals from the businesses in Middleton, across the Beltline, and downtown Middleton. And just, again, based on the 6 other properties that we have in Middleton, those will lease up very quickly, and the 1 bedrooms especially, and some of the studios, will go to younger couples who will just share that 1 bedroom. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is I don't want there to be a feeling that there are only going to be single individuals in the units, and that we do feel that based on the other properties we have in Middleton that we do have the right unit mix here. And on the same hand, we're trying to do something new here based on feedback we've received from potential tenants by adding some 3 bedrooms. And I think that higher density unit is feedback we've received from the city as well. We don't want to burden ourselves with too many of those, which is kind of how we came to the current unit mix.
And when we approve a GIP, we're really approving the number of units.
Right.
I'm actually not as concerned about the unit mix.
Yeah,
I mean, it
looks
I mean, when
good,
we
so-
approve the height and the kind of building massing, if the market changes and you want to increase the number of units, I think other than the impact on parking, at some point in time, since we're not subsidizing them for affordability, I don't want to monkey around too much telling a developer what unit mix he or she needs, because the market might change.
And I agree, I think, this is, they got to rent it, they got to sell it, so.
I mean,
Any-
3 bedrooms are nice, but 3-bedroom new construction, I bet your rents are gonna be $2,400, at least.
Close to 25.
Did it
Not
say?
quite that high, but yes, let's put it, no.
I mean, that's.
No, not quite that high, but
No.
yeah, we look at what we're getting right now for a 2-bedroom at Middleton Center Phase 2, and they won't be, they're not exact comparisons, but I mean, Middleton Center Phase 2 apartment rents right now are up in the 2,400 range for some of them.
For 2 bedrooms.
For 2
Yeah.
bedrooms.
Okay,
I mean, which
That's
is,
why I don't live there.
so 3-bedroom will be.
that's like twice my mortgage. I mean, it's,
Okay,
I
other
have
questions?
some
Yes, Dan.
questions and comments. So,
Yeah, okay.
couple things. I already mentioned the question about the groundwater, to just clarify that what the actual depth is, and the endangered species question. On the plan, it showed an underground storage, stormwater facility. Could you speak to what that is?
Yeah, so we've gone back and forth a lot with Mark and Abby's assistance too on how we want to. Well, first of all, this is obviously a very important topic. It has been, but I think it's even more top of mind now. And since we're so close to the creek, we're looking at a number of options on how to best handle it. And so the option that we've come to pursue most intently has been this underground retention basin. And Veerbicker, our civil engineer, has completed them on other similar projects before. And so it would be placed underneath the surface parking in the center of the site, and that it would be sized to the same size that above ground stormwater facility would be, but instead it will retain the water and then gradually put it back into the groundwater system as an above ground system would do.
You anticipate that it would go any deeper than the underground parking?
No, I think, I'm trying to think. I want to say it's of equivalent depth, maybe 12 feet.
The other thing I would just caution in terms of the design would be when its capacity is exceeded, you want to be sure that you have a overflow path that doesn't endanger the neighboring townhouses.
Yeah, and we've spoken with the engineer on that already, and the other piece of that is having a biannual maintenance schedule for that, and that's something that we're building into our budget as well, that obviously we'll take on the cost of.
That'll go to Water Resources, and they'll look at all that, and they'll set
Yep.
the schedule. I think if I'm remembering correctly, isn't the Stagecoach Klein building, don't
That
they
one
have
too.
same thing?
Yeah, I think that's true, yeah.
They have an underground retention, yeah.
I believe
Yep,
they do.
yep.
It's a good option on a site like this. I mean, plus we have the airport, which is a whole nother. It's an aerial fly zone, so we can't actually have above ground water because of waterfowl that could land there, cause chaos with the planes. So it was an interesting site, but this below grade retention is a decent option.
So you are not pursuing that, getting that land from DNR and putting it there then?
So the DOT does own the land,
DOT, yes.
right, to the east,
West.
Yeah, west.
to the west, yes, to the west of our site. Yeah, I was gonna say to the east of the roundabout. But anyway, so that's one part of that equation. The other part is that there's a fiber optic line running directly through that area that would cost some $500,000
Oh,
to.
All right.
Is
Okay,
that where they
so-
put the new fiber optic after the,
No, it was there before the flood.
okay.
Okay, so that's not viable. All
Well,
right.
there was one thing that we mentioned, and I'm just curious to hear if T-Wall has researched this any further, but when we were talking in our meeting with you about the fiber optic line, the question came up as to whether that line, that relocation cost, that estimate that you had for $500,000 just included the segment adjacent to your site, or whether that was the entire line that goes all the way up the east side of Parmenter to Century Avenue. Because there has been some desire from our planning staff to see the buildings along the east side of Parmenter as properties redeveloped set closer to the street, and that fiber optic line has been a barrier for that. So we actually thought, well, if it's $500,000 to relocate the entirety of that line, then that might actually be something that the city would want to pursue, because it would free up a lot of additional developable property.
So I may have received an email from, again, our civil engineer. We love them, Veerbicker. They've been, was it AT&T that owns that line, or is it Charter?
I can't remember that, yeah.
So I can follow up on that. I mean, we're perfectly fine with continuing the conversation, so the city doesn't have to redo that whole process again. So just to get a number, so let me follow up on it, and I can distribute what I find out.
I remember when the Food Concepts project, the Parmenter Center development, that was an obstacle there, and with Lucigen, and it keeps coming up. And so when that figure was discussed in the meeting, we thought, well, maybe if that's the entirety, it actually,
Yeah, when that
it's a
MIG,
scary number, but it might be worth
that
it.
MIG property, when they came up, we wanted them to move closer to the street, but
They couldn't.
Because otherwise it's all gonna be surface parking.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, let me follow up on it,
Okay,
since the conversation's already been ongoing.
yeah, that'd be good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, I like you guys are considering having some art object there too, which is pretty good, so.
Yeah, so, and to that, Abby had made a request that Terrence was interested in, which was to make a financial donation to have the public art fulfilled, right?
The
Because it's been
roundabouts.
planned, yeah, in the circle.
Terrence is becoming the king of public art. Kind of fun.
I'll let him know you
Okay,
gave him that
Jennifer, you
compliment.
have some-
Couple
oh,
other comments and
Sure.
questions. That pond, in one place it's noted that it's dry, but in the
Conceptual rendering.
renderings, it shows it wet with a fountain. What's
Well, conceptually, at that level, we hadn't had the discussion of stormwater at the time, and I believe and I'm not sure where the idea had come from that stormwater would go in that location, and maybe it was just because from a aerial site perspective, you could see that that's where water had been collecting previously. So from a conceptual architectural level, that may have just been a preliminary idea to put it there. And it could be potentially workable, but what we found out once we started digging into the stormwater requirements is that a wet pond isn't plausible there. Well, it is, but there are some extreme requirements that the airport or whoever the legal body is that creates laws for the airport requires on it, and then this fiber optic line running through it as well. It just makes it kind of financially infeasible.
It was an artistic rendering, in other words.
Understand. So that's obviously to be corrected. Couple other points. In the parking, I didn't notice any electric vehicle charging spaces, but I believe that was in part of the intent. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we've actually worked with MG&E quite often to have, and they actually donate the electrical vehicle charging stations because then their gain is that when they're utilized, they get paid. So on a number of our downtown Madison properties, we've done that, and we'll be happy to engage MG&E on that here as well.
And then one question seems like for the commission, the townhomes. My understanding is you have a zero lot lines, zero setback on those patios. My question is, in approving that, are we also opening up the possibility that some sort of something more than just a slab could be built there? If we're approving zero lot line now, are we basically saying folks who buy those townhomes could build some sort of a screen porch or something like that that would also go up to that line?
There's going to need to be an SIP approved that's consistent with the GIP. Some of these details really are addressed at the SIP level.
Okay.
So I would-
I'm sure that we will get the request, because that happens with almost every
For decks and
subdivision where
patios.
you get a patio and then people want to screen
Well,
it in.
that's what I would think, yeah, so.
But I think that would have to be done, I mean, assuming that the SIP mirrors what they've submitted here for the GIP, any request from a townhome to modify it would have to come back to the plan commission as an SIP modification. So if it's something that you support, the ability for them to be able to screen those and the developer agrees, it would be more friendly from an administration standpoint to include that as part of the submittal for the SIP so that you don't have to come back every time. Is that what you're bringing
That's
up?
really what I was raising is
Yeah.
what will be the allowance or expectation, right?
Right.
And then the final point is, there seemed to be some difference. In one place, it said the minimum lot width would be 15 feet. One other place, it said 13 feet.
Yeah, and so that was part of one of Jeff Maloney's comments. And in the revised materials, so we did amend that to about, I think it is 15 feet. And that has been amended on some plans. And basically, we were trying to be proactive and have already addressed those comments. And we've submitted the electronic submittal to Diane. And we didn't think it would be able to get distributed today, but wanted to show that we're being proactive on the comments.
Yep, okay.
So it has been updated.
Jennifer, you have some comments?
I guess my comment was about the comments that were provided from Jeff Maloney. One of the comments was about home occupations, and so I'm wondering what the zoning ordinance allows right now.
So we have, for vocational uses allowed in R1, we have a set of criteria, and it's, anytime we get the question, we say we do not require a permit for somebody to have a home occupation, but we hand them the criteria that's established by the zoning ordinance, I think it's like A through J, and we ask them to read through the criteria, and they self-determine whether they meet the criteria. Then if we get a complaint, which we often do about home occupations, that's when we go out and inspect, and then we review this list here, A through J, to see whether, indeed our code compliance inspector agrees that, it meets the vocational permitted uses, or if it exceeds it. So we look to see if, we wouldn't allow, a vocational activity to be the primary use in an R1 structure. It has to be secondary in nature. Shouldn't affect the residential character of the neighborhood. It shouldn't generate more traffic than is typical. Let's see.
Signage and traffic and
Signage.
noise.
Yeah. Oh, and the odors, noise, light, vibrations, electrical emissions.
Okay.
Those sorts of things.
Well, seems like pretty extensive.
Yeah,
One thing that we could recommend is keeping this language as something that would be considered as part of maybe SIP? Is that a
no, it'd be part of the GIP.
It is.
So we could say that the GIP approval is that for the townhouses, that limited vocational activities are permitted use as per the R1 ordinance.
Yeah, so
And you'd be
refer
fine with
back
that?
to that in the.
So like,
1083.
yeah, a person could be an accountant, right? And,
Right.
I mean, you don't want anything that has too many customers coming at all, because
Right,
it
that's,
raises the parking issue and changes the residential character.
Yeah, Mark says that's 10.83, so,
Well, I'm asking her to go to it just so we can
okay.
look at the GIP language. This is a good discussion.
Oh, okay.
Mark, related to all this, do you think the parking that's being provided is reasonable?
I do not know. Eileen and Abby, Eileen was leading this project, and so I haven't looked at it, so I can't answer that question, but I would imagine that they've carefully looked at this from a developer standpoint to make sure that the parking meets their needs. So I would presume it's on track, but I can't answer that right now. Maybe Abby can.
Sorry, I haven't reviewed the project.
Yeah. So 10.83, this is the GIP procedure. I thought since you're asking some of these detailed questions, it was useful to quickly go through this. I'm not gonna read it, but I think what you'll find is some of this is more appropriate at the SIP stage.
But the home occupation is a use question, which needs to be solved at the GIP zoning stage.
You could simply say that the intent is to follow the R1 uses.
Right, the R1 use is for
Right.
home occupation.
Well, I would be more general than that, but that's fine.
Right, it's R1 like a townhouse, except townhouses are not allowed in R1, they're R2.
But R2 refers to R1 uses too, so it's
It's more like an R2.
fair enough.
Okay, more questions?
D2.
Teaching.
On your question about parking, so I'm just quickly looking at this, and it looks like, so there are 101 underground, 29 surface, and they've allocated 69 underground plus 15, so 84
It's
for
in
the
there close, like a
multifamily.
1.2.
Sorry, you're looking for the ratio?
Yes, yes.
It's, sorry, I have it written down here. 0.97 parking stalls per unit for the multifamily.
So that's lower than the city, slightly lower than the city of Madison's requirement. And from the research that I've done, theirs is probably the lowest in Dane County.
Madison's is the lowest, yeah.
One per
One
one,
per unit.
regardless of the size of the unit. Our requirements admittedly are a little out of date, but we require 1.5 parking stalls per one-bedroom apartment. We require 1 per efficiency and 2 per two-bedroom and up. So ours are on the high side, but 0.97 for a ratio is, that's Madison, Madison standards,
And
basically.
yeah, I could speak to that a little bit too. So, in doing a little bit of research on the Tribeca Village properties, which are 100% occupied right now, or maybe 98% over the 189 units, maybe 98% of those are occupied, given a couple of move-ins and move-outs that happen from time to time. We have 290 total parking stalls there, underground and surface. And on any given day over the course of a week, and we just recently did a study, 30% of those stalls are vacant, both underground and above ground during, call it 8 p.m. and 3 p.m., I believe is when they did the studies, or, 8, yeah. And so there's a significant vacancy, and then when you start talking about the cost of building that additional underground parking, that's when you, and that you don't recoup revenue from, that's when you start getting into, exorbitant rent levels to absorb the cost from the parking. And then Middleton Center is kind of a different story because there's commercial there as well. But we just did a full 2-week parking log at 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. And there are, in just Middleton Center Phase 1, 97 vacant parking stalls.
Oh, wow. I think it's, following
So-
the Madison standard and,
So that's why we kind of came to this 0.97 to 1.
Are you planning to allow flexible use of all of the spaces and not individually signed spaces per unit?
Yeah, I mean,
Just like Middleton Center, where anybody can use any space, first come, first serve.
that would be a question for our director of operations. She kind of decides depending on the use of the property. But, I guess I would have to ask her what she felt was working at Middleton Center versus what has been working at Tribeca Village, if there's a difference, and then she would make that decision, I guess. I know sometimes she likes to assign, sometimes she doesn't bother with it.
Although there'd be street parking on Clark Street, Public Works might want to consider not allowing overnight street parking to discourage residents, right? I don't know. It's up to Public Works.
Yeah, I would be cautious about that because we don't typically have prohibitions like that around the city, so.
The question I was asking myself is if the capacity is exceeded, what's the plan B? And it looks like it'd be on-street parking, right?
I think some on street here, and there is
Fine.
some available, but we don't anticipate there being. We anticipate there still probably being a surplus of parking even at the 0.97 to 1 ratio.
yeah, I guess.
I think let the market determine,
Yeah.
and if your investors won't fund it because they don't think there's enough parking, then
Right.
And considering the Uber and Lyft just went to market and the way the technologies are
the
changing,
bus lines. Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
having
So-
essentially
A
one
lot-
parking lot for one unit, that's.
Probably one of the
seems
most
okay, so,
walkable
Yeah.
sites in
Yeah.
the
Exactly.
city.
Yes.
And a lot of communities are just eliminating parking minimums. Let the developer provide the amount that you think will work.
This is going to be a great opportunity for people to get rid of their cars.
Yeah.
that they have that work nearby.
I was gonna ask that, you provided data from parking observations. I'm wondering if you have data when people sign leases, if they're bringing a car with them. That's often,
Well, at some of our downtown Madison properties, we do. I'm not sure if we do in Middleton, but what I'd be curious to know is if they will state that they're getting rid of their car or something like that. That would be interesting to know. But I'm not sure if because there isn't a requirement for somebody with a vehicle to purchase a parking stall. So I'm not sure if they have to indicate.
I was curious with the application process, you usually ask a series of questions and you can say, will you need parking, or, you know, there might be a question.
Do you charge for parking?
No, downtown is part
No,
of the
here.
rent.
Here we would. I think it would be like $50 a month.
So a tenant could decide not to, I mean, that's one way to make housing cheaper is a tenant could decide to move in, not take a parking spot.
Right.
Okay, more questions?
Huh?
Just drive over to our lot and park.
Yeah.
Right here, see, it's empty.
One more question is, when I'm looking at your GIP and that poster, how much width is between on the west side of the A1 building, between the building, those jut outs, which I'm assuming are doorways, and the sidewalk that's there? Because I'll tell you, I'm wondering if we can, if possible, shift the A1 building a couple of feet to the east. I don't know what that does to the distance of the ramp and the height of the ramp. But, I mean, we want a street edge along Parmenter, but is that too close to the sidewalk?
I think
The engineer's shaking his head, so he's.
Well, I would think that the reason A1 is as close to Parmenter as it is due to the steep, the grade of the ramp.
You
But
need that
would
much space on the east side for the ramp?
Down.
Okay,
So how close is the building to the sidewalk?
So are you on T1?
Yeah,
no, I think you were asking about A1, right?
on A1, yes.
On A1?
I think it looks like 7, 8 feet.
It's blacked out. There's a line right over it.
Here, that's 6 feet.
6 feet?
Well,
Okay.
it's 6 feet to.
Setback.
Yeah, to the property line, yep.
To the property line, from the sidewalk to the property line?
Yep.
Okay. I'm fine with 6 feet.
Property line.
Sidewalk is the
Yep.
property line?
Yep, essentially.
Okay, more questions before somebody makes a motion. These are item 2 and 3 together.
The preliminary plat should be conditioned on the zoning. I did ask Eileen while we were messaging here, and there was, the order was kind of accidental. It was, I mean,
Okay.
it makes sense to have GIP first,
Okay.
which is what I figured.
So are we ready to make a motion? Somebody?
I would recommend approval of the GIP to Common Council
Mm-hmm.
with allowing the uses in R2 for the townhouses,
R1 or R2?
R2.
Okay, all right.
And subject to approval of engineering and staff comments, limiting the number of units in A1 to 87. Although I guess that's implied in the GIP.
Okay. Anything else? Do we need a,
Could I also suggest resolution of the endangered
Right.
species issue
And
and resolution of the environmental,
right.
contaminants?
Environmental studies?
Endangered species assessment or,
Okay,
The full suite of environmental assessments.
yeah, Wisconsin, yeah, WDNR.
And resolution of,
State endangered species
Yeah.
and ground contamination concerns.
yeah.
okay.
Eileen also has language here, approval contingent resolution of stormwater management at the SIP stage.
Right.
TIA. Dr.
TIA, yeah.
Design review of all aspects of the project is the SIP level, parking, landscaping.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, so contingent on all that as well.
And,
No, that's the
And-
SIP stage, not
and
No,
the
but-
GIP.
comment
That's in
about
the GIP.
including
Oh, that's
overhang
in GIP, okay.
doors.
I'm sorry,
There is a
Jen.
comment. Would you consider adding that?
I would think overhangs on the doors is at the SIP stage, so it's
Okay.
conditional on resolution of all the SIP design review issues.
Okay, anything else?
Do we
Okay.
want to add something about the public art? Or that's just a kind of a side comment?
That's
I
between
think that was
staff
gonna be
and-
handled within the developer's agreement.
Yeah,
Yeah,
'Cause
I
this
had
is in a
talked
TID.
with Taylor about that, and, you know, basically, initially, the public art was being proposed on the private property. I think the idea came up at the plan commission meeting, I think it was either Jen or David, Reed, who had suggested instead contributing to the sculpture, and Terrence liked the idea and has agreed to it, and that will be included in the
In the
TIF
developer's
agreement.
agreement.
Yep.
And can we condition a GIP approval on the developer successfully executing a full-price sales contract with the city?
oh, that's,
Such that,
That's actually, the purchase agreement will be an exhibit of the TIF
we
agreement.
exhibit of the TIF, so it's not a
Okay.
condition of the land use approvals.
okay, need a second.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion now? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as made by Kurt and various amendments, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Now we are on to item number 2, preliminary plat review.
Move to approve the plat,
Mhm.
contingent on resolution of engineering staff comments and, you said zoning approval?
Yes.
And zoning approval.
Okay, any further question or comments? Okay, all those in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Okay, guys, you're free now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Okay.
Can I, actually, can I ask, if things go according to plan, you would start breaking ground this fall
Yeah, I'd hopefully.
on the demo?
Hopefully September, October. And as of right now, things are tracking
Right, so
nicely.
This GAP has to go to council
Yes.
for approval.
So we're planning on, we have council next week, Tuesday, and on the same day, I think that's the 21st, we're submitting for our SIP on the same day. Which puts us, I think, a month out, or is that just 2 weeks then?
2 weeks.
Well, we,
I have it on my calendar,
it should
Oh.
be, it'll be about that.
Okay.
3 weeks.
so we're
3
moving.
weeks for review.
Yeah, we're sticking to the quickest timeline we can right now.
Oh, I guess one more quick thing to point out, this was the first project where we did the new public notification requirements. Did anybody happen to go by and notice the yellow sign there? I know it's a bigger site, so it might have been harder to recognize, but it was the first implementation
Cool.
of that new requirement.
Mhm.
I also stuck a art walk sign out there. Sorry about that.
No, yeah, and well, first, the city of Madison has done that, but their signage doesn't have the grommets in it that yours do, so thank you for doing that, because it's a real pain to get creative with a knife and zip ties without the grommets, and you look kind of insane when you're out on a site, anyway.
Well, we invested in the grommets because ours are reusable, so
Yes,
we figured it was worth the
sustainable.
extra money.
Nice. Well, yes, thank you.
Just please return it.
Yep. I
Okay.
don't want to pay $60.
It always reminds me of Wallace and Gromit.
Okay, all right.
Thinking the same thing.
We are on to item number 6.
Can I suggest moving on to, there's an applicant here for Caliber. They've been sitting in the back.
Okay, okay, all right. So move it to item number
8.
8. All right.
If that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. We are on to item number 8, specific implementation plan modification for sign design review, Caliber Collision, formerly Abra Auto Body Shop, 8026 Forsythia Street.
If 15 new Facebook notifications.
Oh. I also operate the city's Facebook page. It falls under other duties as assigned.
So that shows up on your computer.
Okay,
It's not your own
Trolling
anyway.
one on the Facebook page.
We have a special visitor all the way from San Francisco,
wow.
and someone local. Oh,
Oh,
Philadelphia, I didn't
wow.
know that, okay.
Oh, cool.
Sorry, I just met
Philly.
a woman from California.
Okay, well,
They came all the way here to answer
yeah, go ahead.
questions.
So why don't you
Hi.
present yourself and present what you have?
Hi, my name is Linda Thompson. I'm here, I work for the sign company that designs, manufactures, and installs the signs for Caliber Collision. And so we're really excited. This is our first one in Wisconsin. So, and this is going to be a really nice one. So I met with Mark today and we had talked about the recommendations that had been made. And we'll just start from there.
Yeah, I mean, I can just, what I often do is I just mention or summarize the staff comments. So I had flagged this and discussed this with the applicant last week. My concern was that the signs that were proposed on the north side facing Airport Road, it just seemed excessive to me, especially the sign on the western elevation. Basically, if you were driving by on
it-
Airport Road.
Is that the one labeled A1 or C1 on your?
See what I bet.
Mike's, oh, you don't have to say.
It won't be in this package.
It's in, right, so it was labeled C1.
On the site plan?
Right, it had no street frontage, and that was one of the concerns I had, is it didn't have a street frontage, but it was geared to people traveling, coming from, heading east, eastbound traffic, was gonna they were gonna see three signs, the west elevation sign, the north elevation sign, and the ground sign. It just seemed like overkill to me, and
West,
as our
north.
code says one sign per street frontage, I flagged it. But as I understand it from Linda now, they are amenable to not installing the west elevation sign, but they would like to continue with the other signs, and that's fine with me. I would recommend approval.
Okay. Any questions for Linda?
That was a real high caliber analysis.
I resisted doing that, Kurt.
So we'd still have the north, the east, and the monument.
Right.
North and south
North
North,
and
south, and
in the
monument.
monument.
And the monument. Okay. All right, with those changes, do I have a motion?
But it's just the one change, the removal
Yeah,
of
with
the
that
west.
change, one of them is removed.
I'll move approval.
Need a-
Second.
Okay. Now
Second.
Jennifer, you have some questions.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. So we're approving the north, the south, and we're removing
The
the
west.
west. And there will
So-
still be a monument sign at the
Yes,
north.
we're gonna have D1, A1, and B1 will be the signs, and we're
Thank you.
removing
Removing
C1.
this one.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Does that seem okay to you, Jennifer? Okay. Any other questions or comments? Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of approval of the SIP modification for sign design review as modified for the Caliber Collision 8026 Forsythia Street, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes unanimously. Sorry for keep you waiting that long.
Oh, that's okay.
You flew out here for this?
Had to get it done.
I
Yeah, I should have brought some Yingling for me.
If I'd known, I would have.
What is that?
Oh, it's a Philly beer.
Country's oldest brewery, I believe.
Oh, okay.
I hope you had a good flight, so.
We did. I've never been to Wisconsin before, and it's lovely, so.
Yes, we're enjoying.
It's always this lovely, especially in January.
The winter. Glad it was this time of year.
And they got the cheese curds. I made sure that they.
Gotta have cheese curds.
Good too.
All right, well, thank you very
All right, well, thank you and good night. Okay, item number 6, SIP modification for sign design review, Fontaine Home.
Very straightforward. Both of these actually are very much so.
7535
Yep,
Hubbard.
Just 8
so.
square feet. It's one of the, both of these signs coming up here are in the Middleton Center. So
Yeah.
I
And
recommend-
why are we reviewing these? Because it's an SIP, so we have to
Yep.
review every
And there's
sign?
no comprehensive sign plan for the building, so technically any new sign has to come before the plan commission. I'd like to try and, well, we've also had a lot of discussion about signage, so.
So this is how it looks like?
When a developer submits a SIP, they could submit a
Yes.
sign package regulation that we could approve.
Yes, and that would be a good thing to do.
Especially for a multi-tenant.
Especially for multi-tenant buildings.
Yeah.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor of the approving the Fontaine sign, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes.
What kind of business is Fontaine?
The
Clothing, right?
housewares
Housewares?
store, they have like decorative items, candles, pillows.
Huh?
Wife would
that-
love it.
That kind of thing.
Home decor.
Abby's the resource person.
It's
Well,
it's
actually,
nice to see
Van
the
first told me
retail
about
filling
it.
up.
Yeah.
Since we tiffed the TI.
I
so.
think it's all full now, more or less.
Fontaine was previously on East Johnson Street in Madison.
Right.
Okay, item number 7, SIP modification for sign design review Journeyman and Company,
Same
7525
building,
Hubbard.
11 square foot sign, also recommend approval.
Approval.
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments? Looks good. All those in favor of the motion to approve SIP modification for sign design review of Journeyman, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Now we are on to item number 9, appointment of pedestrian bicycle transit committee. I know who would really like to be there. Right next, sitting next to you, Wayne, I think.
Dan,
Be
would you
happy to do it.
move to approve Mr. Ramsey?
Second.
Okay,
Or to appoint, I guess, not approve, to appoint.
all those,
Sentence.
any questions or comments on other further nominations? Any further nominations?
If he wants more committee work, then more power to him.
Okay,
Pedestrian issues.
if there are no further nomination, more, all those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? So the motion passes. Item number 10. Discussion and set a public hearing on zoning ordinance revision.
Move to set Tuesday, June 11th as a public hearing for the amendment regarding the time of approval for SIPs.
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments?
And this is just required by state law, which said that from the final approval, it's good for 5 years. Our ordinance used to be required renewal every 1 year, so just,
Okay, all those in favor of the motion to set the public hearing date on June 11th, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So we are on to item number 11. Comprehensive plan update, open spaces, natural resources, environmental sustainability goals and strategy and action items and character. This is Mark and Abby, or we are waiting
Well-
for the write-up before we can do anything, right?
Yeah, we don't have anything written at this point, although we are well poised to prepare this section now, especially based on a wonderful contribution by a departing sustainability committee member who just went through 11 years of minutes of the committee and documented every single thing that we've done related to environmental sustainability. We also are, both at a city level and the committee, we're also in the process of hiring our new sustainability coordinator, with interviews to happen later this month. But we don't have this section drafted yet due to staffing constraints, and we will continue to work on it and update you all.
I agree with that explanation, and now I need a motion to adjourn.
Could I just ask,
Yes, go ahead and ask. Yeah.
what is your anticipated completion timeframe on?
For the entire comprehensive
No,
plan?
for.
Oh, for this
For
section?
this section, yep.
You mean as far as just getting the draft completely
yes.
fleshed out and ready to review?
Yep.
I would say probably, we're still probably a couple months out, if I had to guess. But for the
Look-
entire comprehensive plan, we need to get it done, I think, by the end of this year.
It
needs
looks
to be
like,
ready to go.
first the plan was before Eileen retires,
Yep.
and it gets gets pushed back and back.
So this is a busy time of year.
Yes, correct, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's not due to lack of effort on our part, but I think, you know, our, in defense of our department, we have 3 people and we staff about 15 committees. And so as you can imagine, every single one of those committees requires quite a bit of work. And we've got a couple of special projects right now with the downtown plaza and the community campus plan coming up. Mark has his hands full with the airport master plan process. So
Got a question now.
we're buried right now.
Yep.
All right.
I understand.
Now, more questions before we have a motion to adjourn.
I'll say on the airport plan, I was at Cromrie, and I thought that was very well done. It was impressive to see how many folks were there.
Yes.
I heard 150 people, and I didn't think I needed to sign, so there were actually 151. So.
Yeah.
It was between 120 and 150.
Oh, 100, okay, okay. All right. Are we ready for a motion to adjourn now?
Jen.
Motion to adjourn?
All right, need a second, and all those in favor say aye. We are adjourned.